The Duke of Halverstone proposed marriage to a governess in a wet cloak at 7 o'clock in the morning, with half the county already talking, and she had the effrontery to refuse him. "You are being kind," Mirabel Trelawney said. "Kindness is a very poor foundation, your grace. It gives way in about a year." Anselm stood in his own library with the fire going and the rain still coming off her hem onto the carpet, and discovered that he had no argument prepared, but he had not expected to need one. It had gone like this. At 11 the previous night, Lady Hesketh of Marchcombe had missed a garnet brooch, and had decided, on no evidence whatever, and chiefly because her eldest son had begun looking at the governess in a way that made her uneasy, that Miss Trelawney had taken it. She had put her out of the house at midnight in a rising storm with a valise and no character reference. Miss Trelawney had walked 4 miles in it. The only light burning on that road at 2 in the morning had been the library window at Halverstone, where the Duke had been sitting up with his father's accounts and a headache, and she had knocked, and his housekeeper had put her by the fire, and she had slept in a chair with her boots drying and her back straight even in sleep. By 6 the rain had stopped, and a carriage from Marchcombe had gone past the gates, and its coachman had eyes. By 9 it would be everywhere. "I'm not being kind," Anselm said. "I am being accurate. By this evening you will be a young woman who spent a night alone in a bachelor duke's house, and you will not get another place in this county or the next one, and there is precisely one thing I can do that undoes it, and I am proposing to do it. That is a definition of kindness. Then take the kindness," he said, "and despise me for it afterward at your leisure." She was quiet a while. She was perhaps 26, with a plain, sensible face and grey eyes that were entirely too steady, and a way of holding herself that had been drilled into her by somebody or beaten into her by something. "Very well," she said at last, on terms. "Name them. My mornings are my own. I will not be asked where I have been, and you will never, in any room, look at me the way one looks at a stray one has taken in." She lifted her chin. "I would rather be turned out again than pitied at breakfast for 30 years. "Agreed," said the Duke of Halverstone, and they were married 11 days later by common license with 2 servants for witnesses, and Lady Hesketh found her brooch in a boot in March and mentioned it to nobody. He had expected the first year to be an awkwardness they both learned to walk around. It was not. She had been at Halverstone a fortnight when he noticed that the house had begun to work. Nothing had been reorganized. Nobody had been dismissed. The linen came back on the right day, the dairy stopped losing money, the under-gardener's mother got her medicine, and the whole vast creaking machine of the place ran quiet. And when he asked the housekeeper how, Mrs. Dunnage said, "Her Grace asks people what they need, your Grace," and then remembers, in a tone that suggested this was witchcraft of a high order. She knew more Latin than his chaplain, and was too well-mannered to prove it more than once. She could ride anything in his stables. She read the newspaper as though it were a court report, and when he mentioned the Corun Mill dispute at dinner, she asked him 3 questions about water rights that he could not answer and had to write to his solicitor about, and she kept her mornings. 3 times a week she rode out alone before 8 and came back at noon, and she never said where, and he never asked, because he had given his word in a library in the rain. There were letters too. They came in a hand he did not know, addressed to Mrs. M. Trelawney, and she read them at the window and burned them in the grate. He was a rational man. He was rational about it for 4 months. In February he came in from the yard and found the letters on the table and stood over them a long moment, and did not touch them, and then heard himself say at dinner, in a voice he disliked at once, "Am I permitted to know whether there is a man in this?" She set down her fork. "There is not," she said. "There has never been. That is all I will say tonight, and I will not be angry with you for asking, because you have gone 4 months without asking, which is longer than most men would manage. That is not an answer." "No," she agreed. "It is a promise, though. I am not deceiving you about anything that touches you. When I am able, I will tell you the whole of it, and you will find it is duller than you fear." He believed her, which surprised him. He apologized, which surprised her. Spring came late and hard that year. The lambing was bad, and then the rectory roof went in a gale, and then the Corun Mill closed and 40 families with it, and the Duke of Halverstone sat with his steward and his father's ledgers and understood at last, fully, how thin the ground under Halverstone was. That his father had borrowed against everything that could be borrowed against, and had died leaving a great name and very little behind it. He told her he had not meant to. She had come into the estate room at 10 at night with a candle and found him with his head in his hands, and he told her the entire thing in 8 minutes flat, which was more than he had told anyone alive. She listened without a single exclamation. Then she said, "The mill will reopen." "It will not. It wants £2,000 and a man mad enough to spend it." "Then it wants a madman," she said, and put a hand flat on the back of his, which she had never done, and left it there, and went away to bed. The mill reopened in May. Nobody could say who had bought it. The lawyer at Ilminster acted for a trust and would say nothing, and the county talked for a fortnight and then, in the way of counties, talked about something else. Anselm was glad of it and too busy to be curious. He said it to her in June, in the orchard, with the blossom going over. "I married you to stop a scandal," he said. "I want you to know that I have stopped doing that. Whatever this began as, I am in love with my wife, and I would have married you if the whole county had been asleep that night and nobody had ever known you were here at all." Mirabel Trelawney looked at him for a long moment, and then she began, silently and quite dreadfully, to cry, she who had not cried when she was turned out into a storm at midnight. "You should not have said that yet," she said. "Why in God's name not?" "Because now," she said, "I have to tell you." She told him in the estate room with the door shut, because she said she would rather do it standing among the ledgers than sitting under the blossom. "Before I was at Martcombe," she said, "I was 4 years companion to an old woman named Anstisvel, at Sowerby Quay. She was bitter and clever, and everybody in 3 parishes hated her. She paid me £30 a year and made me read Thucydides aloud until my throat gave out. I nursed her for the last 19 months, and I was holding her hand when she died." "I have heard the name," Anselm said slowly. "There was money. There was a great deal of money." She took a folded paper from her pocket and set it on the ledger in front of him. "She had no family living. She left me the whole of it. The house at Sowerby Quay, the harbour rights, the toll road from Coran to the coast, the quarry at Ilminster, and the paper on rather a lot of land in this county. Because 40 years Mrs. Vell lent money to gentlemen who thought her beneath their notice and never once forgave a shilling of it." The room was very quiet. "How much land?" he said. "About half of it," said his wife. He sat down. "That was 2 years ago," Mirabel said. 2 years before I came here. I want you to hear that part properly, because it is the part that matters. I was not a poor governess who came into money after you married her. I was already the richest woman in this county the night Lady Hesketh put me out of doors." "Then why," Anselm said, "in the name of everything sane, were you a governess at all?" "Because I was 22 when it happened, and I had been a paid servant since I was 17, and I knew exactly what I was worth to people when I had nothing." Her voice was perfectly level, which was how he knew what it was costing her. "I had been in 6 houses. I had been talked past at dinner and left off the carriage list and told I might use the back stair. And then one morning a lawyer told me I could buy any of those 6 houses, and I discovered I did not want any of it. I wanted to know whether there was one person in England who would be decent to a woman with a valise and no character. So you went on being a governess." "I went on being a governess. And when I was turned out at midnight I did not go to Sowerby Quay, which is 11 miles, and where the beds are aired and there are 4 servants who call me madam. I walked 4 miles in the rain toward a light in a window, 'cause I wanted to see who would open the door." Anselm Halverstone put his hands over his face. "And the mill," he said, "and the mill, and the rectory roof, and the widow's coal, and the fever doctor at Coran, and yes, and your father's notes. Mrs. Vell held them. I have held them since the day I married you, and I have never once looked at the sum, because I did not want to know it, and I did not want you to know I could." He was on his feet without deciding to be. "You let me sit in this room," he said, "with my head in my hands over money." "Yes." "You let me tell you Halverstone was hollow, and you said nothing." "Yes." "Why?" "Because you had not said it yet," said Mirabel. "You said it in the orchard this afternoon and not before." If I had opened that door in February, you would have spent the rest of your life wondering, and so would I, and so would every soul in this county. I could not buy that certainty for you. I could only wait for it. She lifted her chin, and he saw that she was shaking. I am not sorry. I have been very lonely doing it, and I am still not sorry. He walked out of the room. He walked, in fact, for 4 hours, onto the down above the ford where a man can see 9 miles and think about what a fool he has been. He was angry. He allowed himself that, honestly, for the first hour. Angry at being tested, angry at having been the subject of an experiment, angry at the picture of himself, grinding through his father's ledgers while his wife sat opposite with the answer in her pocket. Angry that the county would now say, and they would, by Sunday, that the Duke of Halverstone had married half a county and called it charity, and somewhere in the 3rd hour, on a chalk path with the light going, it turned itself over. They would say it. Let them. Because he knew, and she knew, and no living creature could ever take it from either of them, that he had said the words in an orchard in June with the blossom going over and a mortgage on his own home farm, and nothing whatever to gain. He had proved it without meaning to. She had arranged, at considerable cost to her own happiness, for it to be provable. Not many men, he thought, get to be certain of that in a whole lifetime. He came back at 11. She was in the estate room still, in the dark, with the candle burned down, exactly where he had left her, which told him everything about what those 4 hours had been for her. I have one condition, said the Duke of Halverstone. Mirabell stood up unsteadily. Name it. Never do that to yourself again, he said. You may test the county for the rest of your life if it amuses you. You will not test me. I am done being examined and you are done being lonely, and if that is agreeable we will say no more about it. She came across the room and put her face into his shoulder, and he held his wife in the dark among the ledgers for a long time. He burned the notes on the home farm himself the following week in that same grate, because she asked him to and because he wanted to watch it. I had rather owe you than own it, he said. He said, and she said that was the most extravagant thing she had ever heard a duke say, and that it was extremely good economics besides. The county learned in August. It learned at the Ilminster Assembly, when Lady Braithwaite, who had spent the spring observing that Halverstone had married his housemaid, was informed by her own solicitor in the middle of the ballroom that the mortgage on Braithwaite Court was held by the Duchess of Halverstone and had been since March. Mirabell did not use it. That was the thing that finished the county entirely. She lowered the Braithwaite rent by 1/5 for the bad year, because the bad year had hurt everybody, and she did the same at Markcombe, where Lady Hesketh could not look at her, and she rebuilt the Coron cottages, and endowed a school at Sowerby Quay for the children of the harbour men, and she never once in her life reminded anybody of what she could have done instead. They came to call after that, of course. All of them. The Duchess of Halverstone received them with perfect courtesy and remembered every one of their names, which she had learned years earlier from the back stair, when none of them had bothered to learn hers. And on winter evenings, when the house was quiet, Anselm would look up from the ledgers, sound ones now and dull, which he had come to consider a great luxury, and find his wife opposite with her feet on the fender and Thucydides open on her knee, and he would think that he had been given the one thing money cannot purchase in any county in England. He had been loved by a woman who had already found out exactly what he was worth without it.